2016 is finally over. And with that, we are able to look back over the past 12 months and see just what horrendous things have happened. Like all the famous people dropping like flies. Brexit. And of course, the end of civilization as we know it. Hey, I didn't vote for him. However, this video is mainly looking at the horrendous things that happened in the world of PC gaming. Mainly because that's the gaming platform that I'm interested in most of all. So, without further ado, buckle up your seatbelts, hold on to your hats, and come join me as we look at everything that's wrong with the world of PC gaming in 2016, or otherwise known as the fails of 2016. Street Fighter V came out earlier this year and faced a great deal of criticism upon release. Firstly, that the servers couldn't handle the sudden influx of players upon release. The cinematic story mode didn't arrive until June. Basic features such as a spectator mode for multiplayer lobbies and a suite of character-specific combo challenges, both of which were available in Street Fighter IV at launch all those years ago, wasn't made available until March. In a sense, it was a marvellous fighting game wrapped up in a truly miserable framework, especially if you were playing in a single player. However, the worst part was what they did in September. As part of a fresh update from Capcom, Street Fighter V included a secret rootkit that gave any installed applications kernel-level privileges. Now, the claim was that this was necessary to allow for cheat detection. The problem was that the rootkit was so badly designed and coded that if the right instructions were sent, any application could use the rootkit for its own purposes. Now, Capcom did apologise for this and did remove it quite quickly from the update, and then carried on as if it never occurred. Just like that time I fought Ryu and won. What? That happened? Despite soaring to brand new heights, space, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare is on the list this year, not just because sales were seriously down compared to its previous installment, Black Ops 3, but because of a lack of crossplay. Now, we're not talking between console and PC, that's always been something of a problem for me, but no, we're looking at the Steam version and the Windows 10 version. It turns out that Activision decided to separate the two versions and treat them as independent platforms, and whilst they were technically the same, they couldn't communicate with each other in terms of multiplayer, which basically meant if you went for the lesser played Windows 10 version and fired up the multiplayer, you may well find you're playing mostly by yourself. Now, Microsoft did soften the blow a little by offering refunds so then they can go off and buy the more played Steam version, but as always with these things, the damage was done and people just didn't like the fact that the two versions couldn't communicate with each other. The long-awaited reboot of Doom finally made its way into console and PC this year and was quite well received. So why is it on the list? Well, one word: encryption. Unlike the console versions, the PC version was encrypted and had to be completely decrypted before playing. Now, we're not talking just a small part of it or just the executable, but every last gigabyte of it, which even if you had a powerful PC, could take a little while. Now, if you were lucky, like me, then it might take about 30 minutes or so. But if you weren't, it could take hours. And there was no indication made that this was going to happen at any point during the release. So this meant that despite a midnight release of the game itself on PC wasn't playable straight away, and for the unlucky few, wasn't playable until far later on. Talk about an anticlimax. Five Nights at Freddy's World was an RPG set in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe and was released to fairly good reviews, although people were criticising it due to it feeling a bit incomplete. The developer actually agreed with them and instead decided to remove the game completely from Steam and offered refunds to everyone who had actually purchased it. He also stated that he would actually issue the game for free when it was actually complete. So in the end, it's not much of a fail, I'll give you, but the fact that you released the game in the first place and actually agreed with people that there was something wrong, that's kind of faily to me. Multiplayer first-person shooter Titanfall got a sequel this year in the shape of Titanfall 2 with an added single-player campaign. I know, I wasn't expecting it either. But despite all this, the reason it's on the fails list is simple. Its release date. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to releasing games, but even I know that if you want your game to do well, you don't release it close to other similar games that are bound to do better than yours. You especially wouldn't want to release a first-person shooter game between the two of the biggest first-person shooters of the year. So why, you may ask, was it released sandwiched between Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty, Infinite Warfare? Apparently, the decision was made by the publisher EA, as according to the developer, it was out of his hands. Considering EA released Battlefield, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why EA chose to make the two games compete against each other. As you can imagine, sales plummeted, and despite some good reviews for the game, it wasn't long before the price was over half what it was from the launch during the holiday sales. Mighty No. 9 was finally released this summer. After yet another delay earlier in the year, the game was finally released, and to be honest, I could go into why the game's development was so bad, but it would take a long time to explain, and there's already quite an in-depth video on YouTube that explains most of this. But the short version of this is due to bad management, bad communication, bad marketing, a constant theme of changing the rules in terms of extra fundraising for features that were supposed to be included in the first fundraiser, changing what language it was going to be sounding in. The list goes on and on, so I'm going to just stop it there. But the final kicker in terms of the game was the response it got, and it was one of disappointment. Bad, frustrating and boring level design, a lack of variety in terms of enemies, bland 3D models, a short play time, a hugely long credit sequence thanking all the Kickstarter people, and generally bad visual effects added to the overall disgust of the game. In the end, what was left was basically a huge missed potential in terms of the next gen Mega Man game. So, in the end, was it worth it? Well, let's put it this way. I'm glad I didn't invest in it. The epic game that is Skyrim has been re-released this year as a Skyrim Special Edition, a remastered version of the original game with improved visuals ready for the current generation of consoles and to introduce a new host of players to the world that is Skyrim. However, PC users weren't really that bothered by it, as we already had quite enhanced graphics compared to the console versions, and we already had access to a whole host of mods. So it wasn't quite surprising that we weren't that bothered by it. Except that when people actually got the upgrade, they actually noticed there was a distinct difference in sound quality in terms of some of the files. Rather than the special edition being improved, it was actually worse. To prove this, listen to this. The first sample is the sound from the original version. The second sample is the sound from the special edition. See what I mean? Well, if you don't, granted it might be difficult to hear, but basically the second version sounds a bit more tinny and a bit more warbly, just to give it its technical sort of terms. So what's the reason for this? Well, it turns out that Skyrim uses its own sort of format for music, and this works quite well as long as you don't turn on the compression too high. Guess what they did? They turned the compression on too high. A fix was issued in terms of the sounds that were affected by this issue. But really guys, come on. Listen to what you're doing. Forza Horizon 3 was released for both PC and Xbox One this year as part of the crossplay program. However, people believe that the PC version was a very bad port, as it had issues when running on PCs that were far more powerful than the actual console. What was the reason for this? Well, officially one wasn't given, so it was down to an investigation by a user in the Forza forums that came up with a possible explanation. Basically, the game engine seemed to be trying to use PC hardware in a similar way to the Xbox One. Now, you might not think there's anything wrong with that, except that the Xbox One uses a unified memory system where both the system and the video RAM are one and the same. PCs have a separate system, and they don't have the bandwidth to allow both access to the system RAM and the video RAM at exactly the same speed. So in a sense, the engine was trying to do something that PCs just can't do. Now, fortunately, there does appear to be a strong desire by the developers to fix the issues, and multiple fixes have been issued by them. But assuming the investigation is correct, you have to ask, what on earth were they thinking when they did this? I mean, there's such a thing as a lazy port, but not even bothering to do more than the bare minimum kind of begs the question is, what was the point in doing it in the first place? Tekken, a fighting game series known for its strange animal fighters and for throwing opponents' bodies into volcanoes. Guess it saves on the funeral expenses, is coming to PC in the form of Tekken 7, which is a good thing, really. But what was bad about it was what was said by the project lead Katsuhiro Harada on Twitter regarding crossplay between PC and console. Now, if you can't read that, here's the rough translation as reported by Flying Wonky's translation. It's not a matter of the technology for getting the PS4, Xbox One, PC players to match up against each other being the issue, but rather first-party company policies and potential security risks alongside the community-perceived reputation of PC gamers being cheaters that is hindering the decision to allow cross-platform play. PC gamers? Cheaters? Why, oh, hang on. Sorry. I was expecting a phone call. Hello?
Yo, bitch. It's Bobo Dates.
Oh, Bobo. Hi, nice to hear from you. What can I do for you?
Bitch better have my money.
Money. Oh yes, of course, that's the 20 million in the mouth, isn't it? Just a second, let me just check things out here. Yeah, no, I've got it. Just a second. I just need to just find it somewhere. Hang on. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay. No, I've got it. I'm just checking the balance. There we go. Right. I'll just send the money to you, Bobo. Okay. Yep. Okay, there we go. You got it?
Yup.
Okay, alright. And we'll look forward to hearing from you too soon, Bobo, okay? Okay, Bobo, bye. Bye. Phew, that was close. Right, what was I saying? Oh yes, right. Well, okay, to clarify a little, Harada isn't really claiming that all PC gamers are cheaters, but rather the perception, presumably among a portion of console owners, that we are. Now, I agree the openness of PC does allow for more of a possibility of cheaters, but it's worth saying that if you're going to sort of encourage people to play the game, you shouldn't really accuse each and every one of them being cheaters. It's a bit rude, don't you think? What? Star Wars The Force Awakens was finally rendered in LEGO this year by the greats that are Traveller's Tales. Now, you can just imagine how fantastic the opening to the game would have been compared to the actual film and all the other games. So at launch, what did you get? This. Okay, as you can tell, it's a black screen. It wasn't until later on that an extra chunk of data became available, and once downloaded, the game was actually finally playable on PC. So why did this happen? Well, your idea is as good as mine, because neither Warner nor Traveller's Tales released a statement indicating what had actually happened. Oh dear. Digital Homicide Studios became famous this year for all the wrong reasons when its founders decided to file some lawsuits in regard to some criticism that they got. In March, a lawsuit was filed against Jim Sterling, known as The Escapist, for assault, libel and slander after he made a video accusing the studio of deleting negative feedback off of their game's Steam review page and banning the users who did so. The lawsuit started asking for over $10 million in damages, but then it was increased to $15 million. However, this wasn't the end of it. In September, they filed an additional lawsuit against 100 Steam users for personal injury, for a total sum of $18 million. This was followed by a request for a subpoena against Valve for the identities of all those 100 users. How did Valve respond? Well, they removed their entire catalogue from Steam, stating that Valve had stopped doing business with Digital Homicide for being hostile to Steam customers. A few weeks later, Digital Homicide Studios dropped the lawsuit against the Steam users, with the studios stating that it was destroyed due to the lawsuit. No. You weren't destroyed due to the lawsuit. You were destroyed due to the fact that you... And now for a section that I would call the honourable mention section, but I'm actually going to rebrand it as the Gearbox section. Why, you may ask? Well, because Gearbox did a few things that were a bit faily this year, but I'm not going to count them necessarily as fails. First up is a game called Battleborn, a class-based multiplayer first-person shooter game that basically went up against one of the biggest class-based first-person multiplayer games of this year. Can't think what it was called though. Ah well, it'll come to me. Anyway, sales plummeted and so did the price, and it ended up becoming part of a humble bundle only a few short months after release. The second mention goes to Duke Nukem 3D. Gearbox announced that this year, being the 20th anniversary of Duke Nukem 3D, they were going to make a special announcement regarding Duke Nukem. People hoped that it was actually going to be a brand new game after the disappointment that was Duke Nukem Forever, and the fact that Gearbox owned the IP. Instead, what was announced was a re-release of Duke Nukem 3D called Duke Nukem World Tour. In it, they improved the engine, utilising a proper 3D engine, and gave people a brand new episode on top of the original 4 episodes, as well as improving the voices of Duke Nukem as John St. John re-recorded it. So why is it on the fails list? Well, let's put it simply. Duke Nukem 3D has been released over and over and over again, and the chances are that you own it in some capacity if you were a fan. There already was a version on Steam called Megaton Edition, which basically included the original game as well as the expansion packs that were very hard to come by. This included Duke Vacation, Duke It Out in DC, and Duke Nukem Nuclear Winter. Now granted, only the Vacation one was really worth playing, but this was considered almost the definitive edition, as this basically gave you the ability to play any part of Duke Nukem 3D that came out in the late 90s. Now, Duke Nukem World Tour replaced this version on Steam, and if you own Megaton Edition, you didn't get any form of discount if you wanted to buy this game. So essentially, you were paying full price for a game that you owned 4/5 of. Despite the fact that they had improved the engine and the sounds, that kind of price was not worth it in terms of what was on offer. Finally, Gearbox announced that they were going to release an upgraded version of Bulletstorm, the ludicrously fast-paced first-person shooter where you basically kill enemies for points and do various sort of trick shots in order to get more weapon upgrades. It's a good game, and I've played it before and enjoyed it immensely, so I was quite looking forward to the upgrade, although it's not actually an upgrade, as similar with Duke Nukem 3D World Tour, there is no upgrade price. You have to rebuy it if you want to actually play the brand new version. Granted, you do get the ability to play as Duke Nukem in the story mode, but the fact that poor Gearbox can't offer the upgrade due to legal reasons is kind of a bit faily, and that is why it is in this section. So all in all, Gearbox haven't done that great this year in terms of things, but there's always next year, guys, don't worry. And finally, at the top of our list is Windows 10. Need I say more? Okay, Cosmo Hat, okay, fine, I'll explain everything. Jeez, you give a hat a personality and what do you get? As you know, Windows 10 came out last year, and promises were made by Microsoft that they had reinvested their interests in PC gaming. This was enhanced by the promise of crossplay, a way of playing games on both Xbox One and PC and sharing the data between the two of them. Now, in order for this to work, they basically use something called the Universal Windows Platform, or the UWP, and this runs on basically anything that runs Windows 10, which includes PCs, Xbox Ones, tablets, phones, yada yada yada. Now, in order to run on the UWP, applications and games have to become UWAs. Now, basically the technology is designed to be cross-platform, but also more secure in terms of what it can be run on PC and in how it actually runs on PC. Now, as you probably saw in the press over the last year or so, developers are quite upset by this. Not because that Microsoft have invented it, but rather that Microsoft are trying to force people who run Windows 10 to use it. It's basically what they do with DirectX most of the time. Each new version requires a different version of Windows, And rather than support previous versions with the new versions on DirectX, Microsoft basically say, if you want to use the new version DirectX, you've got to upgrade your Windows version. Kind of a bad sort of way of doing things, if you ask me. Now, in terms of crossplay, a question has to be asked. At what point are people going to play a game on PC and then switch to Xbox One, or vice versa? Surely you just play it on one or the other, unless your PC and your Xbox One are in separate locations. To me, that doesn't actually make any kind of real sense whatsoever, and I don't really see why it's so important that it works that way. The worst part was the performance of the UWAs. With the added security and the limitations put in by Microsoft, UWAs just didn't have the same access to resources that non-UWAs did. You can see this when comparing the performance of things like Rise of the Tomb Raider in both the Windows 10 version and the Steam version. The Steam version not only runs better than the Windows 10 version, but has access to more graphical options than the Windows 10 version. Other games that were limited to the Windows 10, such as Gears of War Anthology and Quantum Break, both suffered in terms of performance because of this limitation in the UWA. In the end, Microsoft has shown that they just don't understand PC gaming at all. You only have to look at what happened with Call of Duty Infinite Warfare in terms of multiplayer. Now, okay, it wasn't their fault that the two versions couldn't communicate with each other, but based on sales, the people who bought the Windows 10 version compared to the people who bought the Steam version, it was just ridiculous. You know, at the end of the day, people went for the Steam version because they believed that the Windows 10 version would be poorer quality than the Steam version, and that is shown across the board over the terms of games. Microsoft just don't understand that the best way to get people on side would be to give access to the games that they have both now and in the past. Imagine, if you will, Microsoft suddenly deciding to give access to the back catalogue of Xbox games. This is already true for Xbox One. Thanks to backwards compatibility, Xbox One can play games from the Xbox and fairly easily and straightforwardly. Now, surely that kind of thing is possible if you use the UWP and the UWAs, something that is already on Xbox One and surely should be able to be ported over to PC fairly easily. That would make PC gamers stand up and realise that Microsoft were actually serious about PC gaming. The fact that they were actually saying, you know what, yes, we'll give exclusives to Xbox One, but we'll also give the games eventually to PC. Imagine playing the first few Halo games on PC, or any kind of Xbox game that came out in the last 5-6 years could easily be put on PC quite simply based on the technology that is available. But Microsoft aren't interested in doing that. They're more interested in giving us new games and saying that we can play them on 2 different places, when the chances are we're not going to do that. And unless they improve the performance of the UWP and the UWAs compared to what is the System 32 games, they are never ever going to bring people on side with them. And that is why they are at the top of this list. Microsoft have failed miserably to understand what PC gaming is and how the openness and expressiveness of the PC as a platform has given the ability to people to write incredibly cool mods for various games. I mean, you only have to look at Grand Theft Auto 5 or any of the other games that people can quite easily build mods for to enhance the graphical ability, to add features that were not there beforehand. Yes, it opens up the platform to cheating and to problems and hacking, but it has the ability to give people such power over what they do and how they do it. And Microsoft are basically taking this away. It makes no sense. And that is why Microsoft Windows 10 is at the top of the list. Hopefully they can remedy this. Otherwise it'll be Windows 11 that basically takes everything back from Windows 10. Excuse me. And that's it, guys. That's everything that went wrong in PC gaming for 2016, as according to me, Cosmo the Coder. Join me next year for another of my Everything That Went Wrong videos, ironically entitled Everything That Went Wrong with PC Gaming in 2017. Otherwise, like and subscribe for more videos from me in terms of reviews and gameplay videos. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to go compile a list of all the people I want to die in 2017. So I suggest you click that like button if you don't want to be on this list. I'm just kidding. Or am I? Yes, I am.